again, and welcome to the second session in our three-part series focused on application development and how we build from scratch our way. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. Make sure to check out the first part in our series focused on DriveTime and IT, where the auto industry meets technology, and you can find that on our LinkedIn page. While you're there, make sure to give DriveTime a follow so you can stay up to date in all things DT. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into our application development teams and all the cutting-edge solutions they provide to the organization. Once more, we have our host, Greg Sachs, Executive Vice President of IT and Strategy for DriveTime and our family of brands. Greg, take it away.
All right, thank you, Kayla. As Kayla mentioned, I'm your host for the second part of this three-part series focused on DriveTime and the IT organization. Today, we're going to be focused on the app dev part of our IT organization. And today I have with me Aaron McIver, who heads up and oversees all of our software engineers here at DriveTime. He's been with us for about 5 years now. I've got Daryl Portzline, who heads up our inventory product track. He's a newer hire. He's been here about 6 months at this point. And I have Alice Komarinsky, who's our team lead on our retail product track. He's been here for about 6 years and has an interesting journey that we'll hear more about later on. So if you were here in our last episode, we talked a little bit about who DriveTime is, and we talked about how DriveTime is the nation's largest privately owned used car retailer and finance company. And what makes it unique is that we manage this integrated vertical model where there are tons and tons of challenges and unique problems to solve at every turn. As you might imagine, I like to tell people that we really are 3 companies sort of wrapped into one, because you've got this really extensive supply chain and logistics problem and challenge that needs to be solved, where we're acquiring hundreds of thousands of cars from around the country, bringing them into our reconditioning centers, and then redistributing them back out to our 130, 140 dealerships. So in and of itself, that's a huge problem that we get to solve every day. The second part is once we sell a car, we originate a new loan. And some of you may have heard of the Bridgecrest part of our company, which is our finance company. And so lots of interesting problems to solve there related to contact center management and managing payments and helping customers with the easiest way to self-administer their loans on our website. And then the third part of the company is SilverRock. So SilverRock is our ancillary product administrator, and it handles the warranty and the gap insurance and all the different products that tend to get sold along with the used vehicle. And so, as you might imagine, working on that side of the company, there's tons of interesting problems to be solved related to how to manage claims, how to manage a vast repair network across the entire country so that our customers have a place to go to get their car repaired. So that's just a little rundown that we talked about last time for some of the new folks that are joining us today. Remember that you can use the chat function on the site right now if you want to submit any questions that we'll get to at the end during our Q&A segment. So please feel free to drop any questions in there anytime during this conversation, and we'll get to those at the end. So let's take a deeper dive now into our app dev part of the organization. So Aaron, thanks for joining us today. Maybe just start by giving us a high-level overview of IT at DriveTime and how our teams are structured.
Yeah, definitely. So right now we've been growing pretty significantly over the past couple of years, and right now we're at about a little over 200 individuals within IT. Of those 200, there's about roughly 25%, 50 plus that are in the app dev group. And within those areas, we've got tracks, and we'll get to what the track is here shortly. And so within those tracks, we have teams. What makes up a team is a product owner and a dev lead, and then you'd have 3 application developers, which is 3 of the 50 that I was just mentioning, and then you would have a couple data engineers, and you have QA and solutions analysts that would support those teams.
Yeah, so you mentioned tracks. Tell us a little bit about what are the tracks within our organization and how they work.
Yeah, so we've got 6 tracks. We've got DriveTime.com and the presence of DriveTime.com. So a lot of experimentation takes place on the website to really try and identify the best way to reach a customer and drive leads, which ultimately turn into sales. We've got supply chain, which Daryl heads up, that's our inventory track. That's the acquisition of a vehicle, that's the reconditioning of a vehicle, and then the transportation of a vehicle to the dealership. Then we've got our dealerships, which we consider our retail track. So think, point of sale system that supports the 130, 140 plus dealerships that we have across the nation. And then we have our bridgecrest.com presence, which is the loan servicing of the vehicle. So we, put the customer in a loan at the time of sale, and then the collections and servicing of that loan. We've got Silver Rock, which Greg mentioned, GAP, vehicle service contracts, warranty that is sold at the time of sale. And then we've got our corporate track, which supports a lot of our legal and compliance teams, and then some of the third-party products that we bring into corporate, workforce management, things like that. We've got all the teams that ultimately support those tracks as well that I made mention that makes up the sum of the 200.
Yeah, thanks. And so as you mentioned, 200 people in the IT organization, tons of collaboration needed between all of those different tracks and teams. I thought maybe Alice can share a little bit about what the relationship is between an app dev and the other team members on their teams.
Yeah, so a big thing that I always kind of tell people when they're interested in DriveTime is working here, you're not just going to be working with devs or working with like your dev lead or working on your own. You're going to be working very close with the other people on your team. So when it comes to kind of product or business analysts, a lot of times they'll come to you with something that's, they're not going to come to you with a user experience and say, this is how we have to do it. They'll say something like, hey, we want to replace this vendor that we're using for our automated telephone calls. What kind of user experience options do we have for this new vendor? And you'll help them kind of come up with a list of options and help them evaluate those options. And same thing with, if they get a report back from the field that they don't like some user experience in one of the apps, or they're running into some issue in the app, something's running slow, you can kind of come up with options to them and give them options on how we can fix that. And they work with you to kind of flush out those details. So you're going to be constantly involved with making the work, not just kind of doing the development that's given to you. If we talk about working with quality assurance, a big part of working with our QA team is, one, they're going to report all bugs to you. So if you're a developer, they're going to be directly talking to you when they find an issue. So you will be handling that. But also coming up with test plans. If there's someone who's like, hey, this case is in our acceptance criteria and I'm not quite sure how to test it, or is this easy to test? You're going to be kind of responsible for, one, making it so that it's easy for them to verify that, and also helping them kind of come up with test cases and leads that they can use, or customer data they can use to kind of validate the cases that they're supposed to validate. And then on the data engineering side, you're going to work really closely with them to make sure you have all the reporting data, you're gathering the right data that they want to report on. And also they own kind of the database layer, so you have to consult with them anytime you want to save or read anything anyways. So yeah, every part of that team you will be in kind of constant and very close contact with.
Yeah, great. And then we have several support teams as well, such as architecture and DevOps, that are helping all of our tracks build the best systems possible. Maybe Aaron, you can talk a little bit about that relationship and how app devs get involved with architecture and DevOps.
Yeah, so of the 200, architecture and DevOps, I think there's about 6 people in architecture today. DevOps is about 4. And to Greg's point, they're really there to support and enable the teams and the teams within the track. And so they're a multidisciplined, very skill set group of individuals that, some of the expertise does not live within a team or within a track. And they're there to kind of be that sounding board to help ensure that the team is headed down the right path. And maybe they're in a position where they're stuck and the architecture DevOps group can kind of, help unstick them. And then there's also new technologies that they're identifying and POCing out and working through that ultimately we want to, kind of get introduced into the teams. And they help kind of, bridge that gap and introduce those into the teams. And I think Alex has an example recently that retail had stumbled on with business events.
Yeah, so a few months ago, today, as kind of we get more integrated with Azure over the last couple of years, we're saving data and logging data in a lot of different places. And so our reporting group, they would have liked a kind of a consolidated workflow. So if we need any kind of important business data that we want to report on, there's kind of one pipeline for that. They don't have to go read from Azure SQL or go read from Cosmos DB or go read from on-premise databases that we have. It's all kind of a centralized area for them. And so the solution to that architecture came up with was business events. So it basically involves us streaming event data to them, and then the kind of reporting teams can read that however they like into whatever tables they want. So we integrate that into our apps, and we were kind of the test case for it. So it's a lot of back and forth. It's not like they just show up and say like we have to use this. We kind of went through and brought it into our apps and ran into some issues and went back and redesigned some things with them. So it's very much like here's a suggestion, try it out, give us feedback, and then we work together to kind of improve whatever that product may be that they're handing to us.
Great. Yeah, like I mentioned, tons of collaboration across the entire teams. So Daryl, maybe you can help explain a little bit of what systems we have under our umbrella and describe a little bit about how we support those systems going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Our system footprint is very large. So I think, even though we're certainly a car retail company and a finance company, we're definitely also a software company. We're very, very technology driven. We have desktop apps, we have mobile apps, we have internal and external sites, all kinds of things going on. A huge API footprint that supports all that on the back end, helps with our third-party integrations. Just some examples. I obviously can't talk about every app we have a lot. But just some ones I wanted to highlight. We have an internal loan servicing application that our agents use while they're on the phone with customers. So that's going to help them, manage their loans, make payments, kind of all things. That's in our Bridgecrest space that we mentioned earlier. We also have our customer-facing website, DriveTime.com. That's the one that most people would be familiar with from the outside. You can browse vehicles, get quotes, things like that. We also have, and this one's a little bit near and dear to me as I've been ramping up in our inventory track and learning about this, we have our buyer platform, which is really cool, kind of, I think, a very innovative thing that we're working on that allows our buyers that are out there trying to buy vehicles for us to recondition and sell, allows them to kind of have a one-stop shop experience where they can buy cars from across the whole country in one place that's very user-friendly for them. So that's just a few that I kind of wanted to highlight for us.
Yeah, so like you said, a pretty diverse set of systems out in the environment. I assume a pretty diverse set of technologies underneath those. Can you talk a little bit more about what different technologies we use?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're definitely very heavy in the .NET space. A lot of our back-end code, desktop code, written in C#. On the front end, we're primarily using Angular. Our footprint in Azure is growing by the day. Definitely a big push in that direction. All of our new stuff's going into Azure for the most part. We're using Docker and Kubernetes in Azure as well, which has been fun. Let's see what else we have here. So we have the opportunity to use a few other Azure technologies kind of as it's the right fit. We've got just a couple examples. We've got functions, logic apps, things like that. For the most part, that's kind of maybe our core stack, the things that are go-to tools to solve the day-to-day problems. We also have some other cool things that we use as needed. We have some GraphQL projects. We have Ionic, Elasticsearch, Argo, several others I could rattle off, but kind of using the right tool for the right job and what makes sense.
Yeah, that's quite diverse. And so when you think about a single track, how the same or different is it across tracks in terms of all the different technologies that get used?
Yeah, I think we've kind of have a good balance there. The technology stack is largely similar across the tracks. So you're not going to jump in, to a new track, a new code base, and just be totally out of your element and have no idea what's going on. But at the same time, there's definitely differentiation where it makes sense. So we've got, just as an example, I mentioned GraphQL. We have some APIs leveraging GraphQL where it's a good fit, but a lot of our APIs are traditional, more RESTful APIs with Web API. Ionic I mentioned as well. That helps us a lot with our apps where we want to have those mobile apps and the desktop, web app experience kind of streamlines and speeds up our development there. But it's not a good fit for everything. We're looking at Argo, for example, as a way to manage workflows and job scheduling in a better way than we do today. So I think we've kind of struck a good balance between using the right tool for the job, but also not getting so out of sync with each other that we lose track where we're going.
Makes sense, yeah. And so in this vertically integrated model that we run as part of our business, we've leaned probably a little bit more on pure custom app development in the past. But as more different products have been coming to market, we've been looking at different things from the outside. And so I thought maybe Aaron can talk a little bit about how we go about thinking about when to build internally, when to augment with external integrations, and how that process goes.
Yeah. So yeah, to Greg's point, I think historically we've maybe defaulted to kind of, building from scratch and it being a homegrown build. More recently, we've been definitely looking at off-the-shelf products where it makes sense. I think what we try to do is pivot our custom builds to being, intended for market differentiation, right? You heard Daryl mention Bionic, the buyer platform. That was a market differentiator that made sense to build in-house and build from scratch. Something a little different, more recent, where we did revisit and look at what we could get, kind of externally was authentication, authorization, and how we approach that. So as we re-platform and look to re-platform some of our external systems, we didn't really have an ideal solution that kind of fit all of our needs for auth. So went to market, assessed your big players, Okta, Auth0, et cetera. And in this example, we landed on Auth0, where taking that on internally, trying to build that internally, manage, support that long term, really wasn't a market differentiator for us. So it didn't make a lot of sense for us to go tackle that. But where it makes sense for us to tackle it ourselves, we definitely do, and we'll continue to do going forward. But we're also open to right tool, right job, right product, right job.
Yeah, thanks for that detail. And so now we'll change gears a little bit. We'll talk a little bit more about career pathing at DriveTime. We've got a pretty interesting story from Alex here. He's been with us for 6 years, like I mentioned, and I think it's pretty interesting just to hear about his journey so far with DriveTime, if you want to take it away.
Yeah. So in college, I was not looking towards computer science or anything close to computer. Well, I shouldn't say anything close. It's pretty close. But didn't really have any interest in software engineering at all as kind of a career. I was a math and economics major, and I went into education kind of right out of school and was really loving that. And as part of that, because I had to take a couple programming classes in college, at the time kind of forced against my will to teach AP computer science. And we got a grant to have kind of someone in the professional space help out. And as part of the kind of preparation for that class, I really started enjoying the kind of software engineering and programming a lot more than I did when I was in college, and I kind of had to take it for a variety of reasons. But yeah, I really ended up starting to be kind of interested in it beyond just, teaching it. And it kind of got an interview here from the resource that we got. He worked at DriveTime at the time. He was a developer over here. And so I got an interview and started here as like kind of a junior developer and have been here ever since. And really, really loved it. Kind of keep working on everything that we can. So it's cool stuff.
What are some of the roles you've had as you've progressed through?
Yeah, so I've done everything from, throughout my career in general, I've done everything from teaching 5th grade to, junior developer, mid-level developer, kind of Dev 3 team lead, and also running our kind of internship program the last summer and this summer as well. So yeah, a little all over the map when it comes to that kind of stuff.
And now a team lead?
Yeah, just recently. So
how's that going?
It's honestly, it's really enjoyable. It's a new challenge, because I honestly forget that I haven't even updated my LinkedIn yet.
This is the great unveiling of
congratulations. It's a couple months in. I even forget it sometimes myself. So it's a good new challenge, and it's one that I'm really hoping to grow into, and I really love already.
So how would you describe the app dev culture? We've got a number of software engineers in the company.
Yeah.
Obviously other team members, but there is sort of a unity among just the app dev. So what's that culture like?
We're a pretty close-knit group. I think part of it is a lot of the core folks here, because it was much smaller when I started. We were not we didn't have 50 application developers, 200 people in IT. But it's a very close-knit culture, especially on the teams. So like what I always kind of like to say is the kind of mentality, at least in the teams that I've worked in and the people that I've worked with on teams, has been like, we live as a team and we die as a team. So we're all very close-knit together. Every project, it's not just like, okay, we're going to hand this off to this dev and the rest of us are all working on our own thing, and that's kind of it. It's very much like, all the code review and design, the whole team's going to be there kind of going through those things and making sure that their voice is heard and there's any perspective that they can bring to this problem to help it be kind of more stable and work well in the long run. And then also anytime there's issues, it's not just, well, this guy developed it, that guy's problem or this person's problem. It's very much, we're all here together to solve this and figure out what's wrong and come up with solutions to fix whatever the issue is. And then even outside of work, we're also pretty close as well. A bunch of us go hiking together. We've got some camping trips together. So there's a good group there, happy hours. It's a lot of fun stuff.
So that's perspective for somebody who's been here about 6 years now. Maybe the same question for somebody that's only been here for 6 months. What strikes you after only being here 6 months about DriveTime culture versus maybe other places you worked?
Yeah, the first thing I wanted to mention on this one is what were my first impressions. just the extremely welcoming, friendly atmosphere. My first day I came in, and of course there was almost nobody at the office because of the COVID pandemic. And but the few people that were here all wanted to meet me, chat with me. They came and took a nice professional picture of me, which I was able to use across LinkedIn and other places. But just kind of felt like I was getting the royal treatment. So really cool, really unique from what I'd experienced in the past. Another thing, kind of as I've gotten more into the organization and met more folks and worked with different groups, is that I've noticed it's hard to find a really big ego around here. Like everyone's just very open to new ideas, different ways of doing things, even actively soliciting, feedback and experience from, your past experience or just your ideas from your background. I have yet to meet someone who kind of wasn't open in that way. So that's been really cool. Another thing I wanted to mention is teams and tracks and they kind of have a healthy level of autonomy, I would say. I think it's a good balance between, doing what they need to do to get the job done, right tool for the right job, but also with some structure and some guardrails. And I think that working within that and the level of autonomy that the tracks have is really cool. Flexible work environment is another one that's really cool. I didn't know that I would appreciate this so much. I used to be a big work in the office all the time guy. Communication is better, everything's better. I always want to work in the office. And then, of course, the pandemic threw me off of that. And but coming to DriveTime and the level of quality of communication that still happens in a remote environment right now, but also with the opportunity we have to come into the office when we want to or when we need to. If our situation at home, isn't as good for work, we're able to come in and work here. At the same time, if we prefer to work at home, we can continue doing that. So we definitely really appreciate that flexibility. Last thing I wanted to mention was the metrics-driven culture of DriveTime. Again, something I think that a lot of companies talk about, but I don't know how many companies really do it and live it. And I think DriveTime really does. Business metrics are used kind of at various different levels, but even down at the track level as a way to kind of paint a vision for people, get folks excited about things, and also highlight the success and maybe even areas of opportunity and ways that we can improve and go chase more revenue streams or more value for our customers. So I really have appreciated that and kind of the target it gives you to shoot for instead of just feeling like you're shooting in the dark. So
Yeah, thanks for sharing all that. There's no wonder why DriveTime IT has been recognized as one of the top 10 best IT shops to work for in the US. Based on all the feedback, I think it's justifiable for sure. With that, I think we're ready to wrap up. I want to thank Aaron, Daryl, and Alex for being here today with us. Hope everybody out there enjoyed learning a little bit more about what an awesome IT group we have, and especially the app dev component within our IT group. Now I'll pass it back over to Kayla and we'll start up the QA segment.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Graham and team. That was a lot of great information, and we have some questions to get to. Before we do, don't forget, you can still put your questions in the chat. If we don't get to them live today, we'll follow up via email or in our third and final session next week. So we'll start with a question from last session from Manoj. What are the technical skills you're looking for in IT recruits?
I don't know who wants to start.
Yeah, we can. Yeah. Go.
I mean, so for me, it's really kind of problem solving ability is a critical part of it, right? So when we're looking at people, especially kind of, definitely the lower levels, but even the upper levels as well, it's that they have experience kind of getting a business problem and finding a solution to it. That's something I look to. I'm not too judgmental on things like what frameworks they're using or things like that. Obviously we want to ask about it. Familiarity helps, but there's nothing necessarily wrong with using different choices than us. So that's something that I think I would like to point out. But the other thing is, and I've probably said this 40 times at this point, but really willing to work with people outside of the dev lane is a big part of it. Like kind of I said, and everyone here has mentioned that you don't get to operate just on your own. You have to operate as part of a strong and team that communicates well together. So communication, ability to problem solve, and experience working on real things.
Awesome.
Was it tech? Did he say
Technical, yeah.
Technical
Well,
too.
there you go. I just
No, it's perfect.
I think Daryl hit on our stack a little bit, but we've also hired folks not within our stack.
Yeah.
Maybe you're more front end and you've got Angular expertise, but not a lot of .NET experience, but you've dabbled in Java. Hey, you're welcome here. So yes, there's technologies that we typically look for, but that's not all that we have that have joined the organization either.
Awesome. Perfect. This one comes from Manoj as well. Do you guys only develop apps for DriveTime, or do you sell your apps if they have a broader market?
It's a great question.
That's a good question. You want to take it? Go for it.
After you.
Okay.
I'll fill in gaps.
Yeah, I was going to say, we've definitely kicked around that idea in the past. There are certain products and applications that we built with kind of that line of sight and that thinking. Are we actively doing that today? Not today. But that doesn't mean that couldn't pivot or shift at some point in the future, but today we're not.
Yeah, I think that's the right answer. I think the auto industry is such a big and fractured, diverse industry that includes thousands of dealerships, both franchise and independent, probably hundreds of finance companies, both with big banks and also independent. And a lot of the tech that we've built over the years would definitely be a step up from what a lot of those companies are used to working with and having the capabilities of. So in the future, it's something that we would be that we could look into. Right now, we've got our hands full just continuing to grow DriveTime. As I think we mentioned maybe in the last session, we're probably going to be we just finished adding about 50 people to our IT organization, and we'll be looking for another 50 people now as we move forward. We'll be adding about 20 new dealerships to our dealership network in the next 18 months or so. So there would be plenty of work for us to do just to support the integrated model. But sometime in the future, that could be an opportunity.
Awesome. Perfect. This next one coming from Jason B. What do you guys think your biggest technical competitive advantage is compared to your competitors?
Hey, Jason Barnes.
Jason. Hope you're doing well.
Biggest technical competitive advantage. I don't know that it's a specific technology, but I think our willingness to explore new technology, I think is notable, and I think that allows us to maybe bypass some of our competitors. I think everyone generally within the market has access to technologies, but I think the rate at which you are willing to explore those technologies, pull those technologies into your organization, I think at times companies can move slower in that space, and I think that's a strong suit of ours.
Yeah, I would also add just the data intensiveness that we as a company put into everything we do is probably a competitive advantage. Being a finance company, there's a lot of risk in lending, and obviously you want to make sure that you understand your customer, you understand the product you're selling, and there's lots of data that can be brought into that decision, whether it's external third-party data or information you're capturing from the website or different parts of your application process. But putting that all together in a proprietary type of way is, I think, what allows DriveTime to scale the way we've scaled nationally and be, like I said, the US's largest auto retailer that's private.
Awesome. All right, last question here. What about the culture? What do the teams do outside of the day-to-day work?
I mentioned this as part of ours, but there is a group of us that go hiking every weekend, so every kind of Saturday morning very early to a lot of people's happiness. Yeah. But so there's a group of us that do that, and then also kind of go camping together, and then also just, there's people that I work here with that I'm very close friends with in my personal life. We go out to dinner and we hang out with our families, it's fun stuff like that. Also a good amount of happy hours, and when COVID isn't happening, there's some kind of fun outings that happen throughout the year that are really enjoyable. Playing golf, there is a group that does a lot of golf together. I'm not a golf man myself, but there is a group of the developers and kind of associated folks who go golfing. So there's a lot of activities outside of work that people do here.
Well, I have to say I don't spend all my time on Slack, but we have a number of channels out there for probably any interest that anyone can imagine. There's mountain biking channels and video game channels and there's a healthy amount of conversation going at all times. I think.
There's an entire channel dedicated to mechanical keyboards.
Mechanical keyboard channel.
Yeah.
Yeah, check into that one.
That's one thing
Next
during
time.
the pandemic that I was really kind of proud and surprised of was the amount of bizarre Slack channels that started growing, like just for non-work interests.
We need
It's
this,
a lot of fun.
yeah.
Yeah, it's getting that kind of time spent together somewhere else, which has been it's good that that's been able to
Yeah, I
happen.
saw just the other day, someone put in maybe just a general channel, just, hey, I'm looking at solar for my house. Has anybody worked? A bunch of people jump in there helping out on what they know about solar. So it's a pretty good group, pretty tight-knit group of people looking to help each other.
Yeah, maybe I'll mention like another new guy perspective on that too. I mean, I feel like when I first joined the organization, I actually jumped into kind of the Bridgecrest space for a little while, and just really tight knit group. You could tell they'd all been friends for quite some time. Even the newer folks already were kind of integrated into that friendship bubble, and it was fun to jump into that. And it certainly wasn't the type of bubble that was hard to get inside of, but very very fun group. People are very open with showing appreciation for the work you do and for your contribution. So yeah.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, guys, that concludes our Q&A. Like I said, if we didn't get to you today, we will follow up via email. Thank you to our panel and for all of you attending. We hope you walk away with some knowledge on our app dev teams and all the exciting things they're doing for our organization. Don't forget to join us in our next third and final session next week, Tuesday, April 27th at 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. We cannot wait to see you there. Thanks, guys.
Bye, Jason.